The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Medical Center recovery wing hummed with the same sterile indifference they had for the past 6 months. Dr. Victoria Chen-Morrison gripped the parallel bars until her knuckles turned white, her legs trembling beneath her as she forced herself to take another step. Just one more step. 7 months pregnant, still using a wheelchair most days. Her body a battlefield of healing fractures and torn ligaments from the car accident that had nearly killed her and their unborn daughter. The accident that her husband, Dr. Marcus Morrison, chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at this very hospital, had been too busy to visit her for during the first 72 critical hours. He'd been in surgery, his secretary Natalie had explained in a text message. An emergency case. He'd come as soon as he could. Victoria had believed her then, had believed so many lies. Excellent progress, Dr. Chen. Her physical therapist, Rosa, spotted her carefully. Your mobility has improved 50% in just 2 weeks. At this rate, you'll be walking independently before the baby comes. Victoria managed a smile, though everything hurt. Her hips, her back, her left leg where the titanium rod had been inserted. But none of it compared to the pain that was about to walk through that door. She could hear him in the hallway. Marcus's voice, that smooth baritone that had once made her heart skip, now it made her stomach clench with a dread she couldn't name. The door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway of the physical therapy room, tall and handsome in his pressed white coat, his surgeon's hands holding a manila envelope that Victoria somehow knew would destroy everything. Behind him, partially hidden, but not hidden enough, stood Natalie Harper. 28 years old, blonde, perfectly fit in her fitted dress, her hand resting possessively on Marcus's arm. Her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile, more like satisfaction. Victoria, Marcus's voice was carefully neutral, clinical even, as if she were a patient he was about to deliver bad news to. We need to talk. Rosa glanced between them, her face tightening with understanding. She'd seen this before. She'd seen everything in 20 years as a physical therapist in a hospital where people's lives fell apart between sets of leg lifts and balance exercises. I'll give you some privacy, Rosa said quietly, touching Victoria's shoulder. Don't push too hard. Remember what we talked about? Dignity doesn't break, baby. That's what Victoria's grandmother used to say. Chen women survive. Victoria released the parallel bars carefully, lowered herself into her wheelchair with practiced movements that hid how much it still hurt. Every movement was a negotiation with pain, a reminder of the 18-wheeler that had run a red light 6 months ago. The truck driver had been texting. Victoria had been driving home from the hospital after a 12-hour shift in the research lab. She'd been 7 weeks pregnant, hadn't told Marcus yet, wanted to wait until she was sure. The impact had shattered her pelvis, fractured her femur, crushed her left ankle. The emergency surgery had saved her life. The baby had survived by some miracle the trauma surgeon called impossible and unprecedented. Marcus had arrived at the hospital 4 hours after Victoria woke from her first surgery. His hair was mussed, his shirt slightly wrinkled, and he smelled like perfume that wasn't Victoria's. She'd noticed, filed it away, told herself she was being paranoid, that trauma made you suspicious, that her brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon husband deserved better than her irrational jealousy. Now Marcus crossed the physical therapy room with measured steps, Natalie following like a shadow. He pulled a chair from against the wall, positioned it carefully in front of Victoria's wheelchair, sat down with his knees almost touching hers. The intimacy of the gesture felt like mockery. I'm going to be direct, Marcus began, because I respect you too much to drag this out. Respect? The word landed like a stone in Victoria's chest. I want a divorce. The room tilted. Victoria's hand instinctively went to her swollen belly. 7 months of life growing inside her, despite everything her body had been through. What? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Marcus slid the manila envelope onto her lap. The papers are ready. I've had my lawyers draw everything up. If you sign now, we can expedite the process. Have it finalized before the baby comes. Victoria stared at the envelope, couldn't process what she was hearing. They'd been married for 8 years. 8 years of supporting his career, of putting her own research on hold, of being the perfect doctor's wife. Marcus, I don't understand. Is this about the accident? About the wheelchair? I'm getting better. Rosa says it's not about the accident. His voice was flat. It's about us. We've grown apart. You're focused on your recovery, on the baby. I need someone who can be a partner in my life, not a patient. The cruelty of those words hit her like a physical blow. I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. Are you? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Victoria felt the world stop spinning. What did you just say? Natalie stepped forward then, her hand sliding onto Marcus's shoulder with possessive ease. Marcus and I have discussed this extensively. The timing of your pregnancy announcement was convenient. Right after the accident, when you knew he'd feel obligated to stay. You're insane. Victoria's voice shook. This baby is Marcus's. We've been married for 8 years. How dare you? The accident was 6 months ago. Marcus's voice was cold now, surgeon cold, the voice he used when delivering terminal diagnoses. You claimed you were 7 weeks pregnant then, but your abdomen wasn't showing any signs. No morning sickness, no weight gain, nothing. Because I'd just been in a catastrophic accident. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheelchair armrests. My body was in survival mode. The doctors explained all of this. You were there for those conversations. I was there, Marcus agreed. And I've had time to think about it. About your sudden pregnancy announcement. About how convenient the timing was. About how you've always been so focused on keeping me tied down. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Marcus, please. I don't know what she's told you, what she's made you believe, but this baby is yours. You know that. You have to know that. What I know, Marcus said, standing up, is that I'm done. Sign the papers, Victoria. Make this easy for both of us. He turned toward the door. Natalie followed, but paused at the threshold, turned back with a smile that was pure venom. Oh, and Victoria? Natalie's voice was syrup sweet. You should know that Marcus and I have been together for over a year, since before your accident. He was going to leave you anyway. The accident just complicated things. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. Victoria sat alone in the physical therapy room, 7 months pregnant, still recovering from injuries that had nearly killed her. Staring at divorce papers that called her a liar and her unborn daughter illegitimate. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital billing department. Your insurance has been canceled. Outstanding balance, $347,892. Payment required immediately. Victoria's hands were shaking too hard to hold the phone. It clattered to the floor beside her wheelchair. She looked down at her swollen belly, at the place where her daughter was growing despite everything. We're going to be okay, she whispered, though she didn't believe it. Mama's going to figure this out. But she had no idea how. 3 miles away, In the office of Chen and Associates Legal Trust, an elderly attorney named Robert Chen was reading a letter he'd been instructed to deliver only upon specific circumstances. The death of Dr. Margaret Chen, Victoria's grandmother, and evidence that Victoria's marriage was in crisis. Both conditions had just been met. Robert picked up his phone and dialed Victoria's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Dr. Morrison, this is Robert Chen. I was your grandmother's attorney. I have urgent information regarding your inheritance. Please call me as soon as possible. It's about the hospital." He hung up, sat back in his leather chair, and looked at the documents spread across his desk. St. Catherine's Medical Center, founded by Margaret Chen 40 years ago with money from a malpractice settlement. Built into an $800 million empire through brilliant investments and careful management. Owned entirely by a medical trust that Margaret had established. A trust with one beneficiary, Victoria Chen-Morrison. Marcus had no idea he'd just abandoned the woman who could fire him with a single signature. But he was about to find out. 10 years ago, Victoria Chen had been a rising star in cardiac research at Johns Hopkins. 24 years old, already published in 3 major journals, on track for early tenure. Her grandmother Margaret, a retired trauma surgeon who'd built her own medical empire, had been so proud. "You're going to change the world, Sun Nu," Margaret would say in Mandarin, calling her granddaughter. "Chen women don't just survive. We heal others." Victoria had met Marcus Morrison at a medical conference in Baltimore. He was a surgical resident, handsome and confident, presenting research on minimally invasive valve replacement. She'd asked a question during Q&A that made him stumble, made him laugh, made him seek her out at the reception afterward. "You destroyed me up there," he'd said, handing her champagne with a grin that could melt ice. "I'm Marcus Morrison, and you're the youngest researcher in the room. Victoria Chen. And your methodology had a fatal flaw in the control group. Brutal and beautiful. Want to have dinner and tell me all the other ways my research is garbage?" She should have walked away, should have recognized the charm offensive for what it was. But she was 24 and brilliant, and so tired of being taken seriously by everyone except men her own age. Marcus had made her feel seen, made her laugh, made her forget, for a little while, that she was the girl who'd spent her teenage years helping her immigrant grandmother navigate American medicine. They married 6 months later. Too fast, her grandmother had warned. Too soon. But Victoria was in love with the idea of being in love. Marcus's career had taken off immediately. Chief resident, then fellowship at Cleveland Clinic, then the offer at St. Catherine's as an attending surgeon. Each move required Victoria to uproot her own research, to start over, to put her career on hold just temporarily. Temporarily became 3 years, then 5, then 8. Victoria had ended up in a research position at St. Catherine's. Good work, important work, but not the tenure-track position she'd once been offered at Hopkins. Not the groundbreaking research she'd been doing before. "It's just until I make chief," Marcus would say. "Then we'll figure out what's next for your career." But next never came. There was always another surgery, another promotion to chase, another reason why Victoria needed to be flexible, supportive, understanding. Her grandmother had watched it happen with quiet disapproval. "He's erasing you," Sun Nu. Little by little, day by day. Chen women don't disappear for men. "It's called partnership, Nai," Victoria had said. "It's called supporting each other. Support doesn't only flow one direction." Victoria had dismissed the warnings, had convinced herself that marriage meant sacrifice, that love meant putting someone else's dreams ahead of your own. She'd been wrong. The signs had been there for years. The late nights that were emergency surgeries, but never appeared on the OR schedule. The sudden interest in how he looked, expensive haircuts and designer suits. The way he'd started criticizing Victoria's appearance. "You used to take care of yourself," he'd said one night, 6 months before the accident. "Now you just wear scrubs and ponytails. Don't you want to be attractive anymore?" Victoria, who worked 12-hour days in a research lab, who was trying to develop a breakthrough in cardiac tissue regeneration, who came home exhausted every night to a husband who'd never once cooked dinner. "I'm a scientist, Marcus, not a model." "You're my wife. That should mean something." The criticisms had escalated. Her weight, she'd gained 15 pounds. Her clothes, too casual. Her friends, too demanding of her time. Her family, too involved in their marriage. Slowly, systematically, Marcus had isolated her. Made her feel like she was failing at being a wife while he was succeeding at being a surgeon. By the time of the accident, Victoria had barely recognized herself. The confident researcher had become a woman who apologized for existing, who tried desperately to be perfect enough, thin enough, attractive enough, supportive enough. It was never enough. The accident had been the excuse Marcus needed. Victoria, broken and healing, dependent on others for basic care, was the ultimate burden, the ultimate imperfection. And Natalie Harper, his 28-year-old secretary with her perfect body and her endless availability, had been waiting in the wings. Now, sitting in the physical therapy room with divorce papers in her lap and her daughter kicking against her ribs, Victoria finally understood what her grandmother had been trying to tell her. Partnership wasn't sacrifice. It was equality. And she'd been sacrificing herself for 8 years to a man who'd never valued her at all. Victoria had called an Uber to get home from the hospital. Her own car had been totaled in the accident. Marcus had promised to buy her a new one when things settled down. 6 months later, she was still waiting. The driver helped her into the back seat, collapsed her wheelchair, loaded it into the trunk. He didn't ask about the tears streaming down her face. People who drove for hospitals learned not to ask about tears. Their house, Victoria's mind stumbled over that. His house now, apparently, was in an upscale neighborhood 30 minutes from St. Catharines. A 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured lawn and a 3-car garage. They'd bought it 5 years ago, right after Marcus made chief. Victoria had loved this house, had imagined raising children here, had painted the smallest bedroom a soft yellow for the nursery they'd someday fill. Now, as the Uber pulled into the driveway, she saw Marcus's BMW and Natalie's Mercedes both parked in the garage, side by side, like they belonged there, like Victoria didn't. The front door was locked. Victoria stared at the keypad for her wheelchair-accessible entrance ramp installed 2 months ago at her grandmother's insistence before her death. Punched in the code she'd used for 6 months. Access denied. She tried again. Same result. Her hands were shaking as she maneuvered her wheelchair to the front door. Rang the doorbell of her own home. Natalie answered. She'd changed clothes. Instead of the professional dress she'd worn at the hospital, she was now wearing one of Victoria's robes. Victoria's favorite silk robe, the one her grandmother had bought her from Beijing, the one with hand-embroidered cherry blossoms. The symbolism was deliberate, vicious. Victoria. Natalie's voice was pleasant, friendly, as if Victoria were a neighbor dropping by unexpectedly. Marcus said you'd be by to collect your things. This is my house. I live here. Not anymore. Natalie leaned against the doorframe, blocking the entrance. Marcus owns this house. His name is on the deed. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay. Victoria felt her breath catch. That's not possible. We bought this house together. Both our names— Check the deed, Natalie interrupted. Only Marcus's name is on it. Apparently there was some issue with your signature when you closed. The title company only recorded him as owner. That wasn't true. Victoria had been there, had signed everything, had watched the title company notarize every document. But arguing wasn't going to help. Not now. Fine, I'll get my things and go. You have 30 minutes. Natalie pulled out her phone, set a timer with exaggerated precision. After that, Marcus will call the police for trespassing. Trespassing? I'm his wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife. Natalie's smile widened. And this property belongs to him. So, yes, trespassing. I'd hurry if I were you. 30 minutes goes fast. She stepped aside, finally, letting Victoria maneuver her wheelchair through the door. The house looked different. Wrong. Natalie's things were everywhere. Her coat on the hook where Victoria's used to hang, her shoes by the door, her laptop on the kitchen counter. Marcus appeared from the master bedroom. Their bedroom. Except it clearly wasn't Victoria's anymore. Victoria. Good. Let's keep this civil. Civil? Victoria's voice cracked. You're throwing me out of my own home while I'm 7 months pregnant. You're denying our daughter is yours? Your mistress is wearing my grandmother's robe. And you want civil? Marcus's jaw tightened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Take your clothes, your personal items, whatever you need. The furniture stays. The joint account has been closed. What? Victoria felt the floor tilt beneath her wheelchair. The joint account. I closed it this morning. The balance has been transferred to my personal account. You'll need to establish your own finances. Marcus, that account had $43,000 in it. My research grant money, my savings, my emergency fund. Our community property, Marcus corrected. And since I'm the primary earner, my lawyer advised me to secure the marital assets before filing. That's theft. It's protecting my interests. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the time. 27 minutes. I'd start packing if I were you. Victoria looked at her husband. No, looked at this stranger wearing her husband's face, and felt something break inside her. Not her spirit. Something else. Something that had been holding her back, keeping her small, making her believe she deserved this treatment. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Marcus turned toward the bedroom. Natalie, can you help her reach the high shelves? She might need her winter clothes. The next 27 minutes were a blur of humiliation. Victoria packed what she could reach from her wheelchair. Clothes thrown haphazardly into suitcases, photos of her grandmother grabbed from shelves, her laptop and research files. The baby clothes she'd been collecting for 7 months, each tiny outfit a promise she'd made to her daughter. Natalie followed her from room to room, making comments designed to wound. This dress would never fit you now. Leave it. Are you really taking baby clothes? Marcus says the paternity is questionable. Your grandmother's jewelry is community property. Marcus might want to give those pieces to someone who'll actually appreciate them. Victoria ignored her, focused on packing, on surviving, on getting through the next 20 minutes without giving them the satisfaction of seeing her break. When she entered the nursery, the room she'd painted yellow, where she'd assembled a crib and hung curtains and imagined rocking her daughter to sleep, Victoria found Natalie had already been there. The room was stripped, crib disassembled, curtains gone, the walls painted over in gray. We're turning it into Marcus's home office, Natalie explained from the doorway. He needs a quiet space to work on his research. The chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery deserves that, don't you think? Victoria stood up from her wheelchair. balanced on her recovering legs, walked 3 careful steps to the window where her curtains had hung. Where she'd stood 6 months ago, 7 weeks pregnant and full of hope, imagining her daughter's future. "You think you've won?" Victoria said quietly, not turning around. "You think taking my home, my husband, my life makes you powerful? I don't think it. I know it." Natalie's voice was smug. "I'm younger. I'm beautiful. I'm not broken. I'm everything you're not, Victoria. And Marcus sees that. Everyone sees that." Victoria turned slowly, met Natalie's eyes. "You're right about one thing. You are everything I'm not." She walked past Natalie, back to her wheelchair, lowered herself into it with careful dignity. "I would never be cruel enough to do this to another woman." The timer on Natalie's phone went off, a cheerful chime that sounded obscene in the silence. "Time's up," Natalie announced. "Marcus, should I call the police?" "That won't be necessary." Victoria maneuvered toward the door, her 2 overstuffed suitcases balanced awkwardly on her lap. "I'm leaving." Marcus appeared in the hallway, watched her struggle with the bags, made no move to help. "The divorce papers," he said. "Sign them soon. My lawyer will be in touch about the terms." "Terms?" "You'll get nothing from the house sale, nothing from my retirement accounts, nothing from our investments. The prenup is clear. We don't have a prenup." Marcus smiled. "Check the wedding paperwork. You signed it at the courthouse. My father's lawyer drew it up. You were so excited about getting married, you didn't read what you were signing." Victoria's stomach dropped. She remembered the courthouse, remembered being in love and trusting and so eager to start their life together that she'd signed everything the clerk put in front of her. "My lawyer will review it." "You can't afford a lawyer," Marcus said flatly. "Your insurance is canceled. Your income from the research lab ends next week. I had administration terminate your contract, and the joint account is closed. You have nothing, Victoria. Sign the papers, walk away, and at least you'll have your dignity." The front door was open. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through, golden and mocking. Victoria maneuvered her wheelchair down the ramp, heard the door slam behind her. She made it to the sidewalk before her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "Hope you enjoyed your last day in a real home. P.S. That robe was a gift from Marcus. Your grandmother's taste was always so tacky." N. Attached was a photo. Marcus and Natalie in bed. Victoria's bed. The sheets she'd picked out, the room she'd decorated. Smiling, mocking, victorious. Victoria deleted the photo with shaking hands, called another Uber, gave the driver the only address she could think of. St. Catherine's Medical Center. The hospital she'd never really thought about as more than her workplace. The hospital that, unknown to anyone, she was about to inherit. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Chen women don't break. We wait, we watch, and we win." Victoria placed one hand on her swollen belly, felt her daughter kick against her palm. "He made a mistake," she whispered. "The biggest mistake of his life." She just didn't know it yet, but she was about to find out. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Medical Center Recovery Wing hummed with the same sterile indifference they had for the past 6 months. Dr. Victoria Chen-Morrison gripped the parallel bars until her knuckles turned white, her legs trembling beneath her as she forced herself to take another step. Just one more step. 7 months pregnant, still using a wheelchair most days, her body a battlefield of healing fractures and torn ligaments from the car accident that had nearly killed her and their unborn daughter. The accident that her husband, Dr. Marcus Morrison, chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at this very hospital, had been too busy to visit her for during the first 72 critical hours. He'd been in surgery, his secretary Natalie had explained in a text message. An emergency case. He'd come as soon as he could. Victoria had believed her then, had believed so many lies. Excellent progress, Dr. Chen. Her physical therapist, Rosa Martinez, spotted her carefully, hands hovering near Victoria's hips in case she faltered. Your mobility has improved 50% in just 2 weeks. At this rate, you'll be walking independently before the baby comes. Victoria managed to smile, though everything hurt. Her hips, her back, her left leg, where the titanium rod had been inserted after the femur fracture. The pelvic reconstruction that had required 3 surgeries. The ankle that had been crushed so completely that 2 orthopedic surgeons had recommended amputation before a third had said he could try to save it. But none of that pain compared to what was about to walk through that door. She could hear him in the hallway, Marcus's voice, that smooth baritone that had once made her heart skip, that had whispered promises in the dark, that had said, "I do," 8 years ago in a small ceremony her grandmother had attended with silent disapproval. Now, his voice made Victoria's stomach clench with a dread she couldn't name. The door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway of the physical therapy room, tall and handsome in his pressed white coat, his surgeon's hands holding a manila envelope that Victoria somehow knew would destroy everything. His dark hair was perfectly styled, touched with distinguished gray at the temples. His Italian leather shoes probably cost more than Victoria's wheelchair. Behind him, partially hidden but not hidden enough, stood Natalie Harper. 28 years old, blonde hair swept into a flawless ponytail, perfectly fit in her fitted dress that hugged curves Victoria's broken body could no longer achieve. Her hand rested possessively on Marcus's arm, fingers curled around his bicep with the casual ownership of someone who knew she'd already won. Her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. More like satisfaction. More like victory. Victoria. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. Clinical, even. As if she were a patient he was about to deliver bad news to. Not the woman who'd supported him through medical school. Through residency. Through fellowship. Through every step of the career that had made him one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in the Northeast. As if she weren't sitting there 7 months pregnant with his daughter. We need to talk. Rosa glanced between them, her experienced eyes taking in the manila envelope, the secretary's possessive grip, the way Marcus wouldn't quite meet Victoria's eyes. Her face tightened with understanding. She'd seen this before. Probably hundreds of times in her 20 years as a physical therapist in a hospital where people's lives fell apart between sets of leg lifts and balance exercises, where husbands decided their wives were too broken to be worth fixing. I'll give you some privacy, Rosa said quietly, touching Victoria's shoulder with the kind of gentle firmness that said, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Don't push too hard today. Remember what we talked about. Dignity doesn't break, baby. That's what Victoria's grandmother used to say, switching between Mandarin and English the way she'd done her whole life, navigating between 2 worlds with fierce grace. Chen women survive. We bend, but we don't break. Victoria released the parallel bars carefully, her movements practiced after 6 months of relearning how to exist in a body that had been shattered and pieced back together. She lowered herself into her wheelchair, a top-of-the-line model that her grandmother had insisted on buying before her death 3 months ago. The best for my son knew, Margaret Chen had said, using the Mandarin word for granddaughter. You're going to heal, and you're going to be strong again. Victoria had cried at the gift, at the certainty in her grandmother's voice, at the love that still surrounded her, even as her marriage crumbled around her. Every movement was still a negotiation with pain, a reminder of the 18-wheeler that had run a red light 6 months ago on a rainy Tuesday night, a reminder that life could change in an instant, that everything you thought was solid could shatter like glass. The truck driver had been texting. Victoria had been driving home from the hospital after a 12-hour shift. In the cardiac research lab where she studied tissue regeneration. She'd been 7 weeks pregnant, hadn't told Marcus yet, wanted to wait until she was past the first trimester to be sure. The impact had shattered her pelvis in 4 places. Fractured her left femur so completely the bone had broken through the skin. Crushed her left ankle into fragments that the first surgeon said looked like puzzle pieces. The airbag had deployed, saving her life, but bruising her so severely she'd looked like she'd been beaten. The emergency surgery had taken 11 hours. 3 surgical teams working simultaneously to piece her back together. The trauma surgeon had come out afterward and told Marcus, who'd finally arrived 4 hours after Victoria woke from anesthesia, that it was a miracle Victoria had survived. That the baby surviving was impossible, unprecedented, something he'd never seen in 30 years of trauma medicine. Marcus had arrived at the hospital 4 hours after Victoria woke from her first surgery. His hair was mussed, his shirt slightly wrinkled, and he smelled like perfume that wasn't Victoria's. A floral scent, something expensive and cloying that made Victoria's stomach turn. She'd noticed, filed it away, told herself she was being paranoid. That trauma made you suspicious of everything. That her brilliant cardiothoracic surgeon husband deserved better than her irrational jealousy. That he was probably just stressed from rushing to the hospital. That the perfume was probably from a grateful patient. That the wrinkled shirt was because he'd been doing emergency surgery and hadn't had time to change. She'd made excuses for him then. Would continue making excuses for months. Now Marcus crossed the physical therapy room with measured steps, Natalie following like a shadow in expensive heels. He pulled a chair from against the wall, positioned it carefully in front of Victoria's wheelchair, sat down with his knees almost touching hers. The intimacy of the gesture felt like mockery. Like he was pretending they were about to have a normal conversation, a discussion between equals, instead of what this clearly was, an execution. "I'm going to be direct," Marcus began, his voice taking on that professional tone he used with difficult family members in the cardiac ICU. "Because I respect you too much to drag this out." Respect. The word landed like a stone in Victoria's chest, heavy and cold and wrong. "I want a divorce." The room tilted. Victoria's hand instinctively went to her swollen belly. 7 months of life growing inside her, despite everything her body had been through. Despite the trauma, the surgeries, the medications, the pain. Their daughter had held on through all of it. Their daughter who kicked against Victoria's palm right now as if sensing her mother's distress. "What?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Weak. The voice of someone who'd spent 6 months being told she was broken. That she was a burden. That she should be grateful anyone stayed with her at all. Marcus slid the manila envelope onto her lap. It landed heavy, final. "The papers are ready. I've had my lawyers draw everything up. Everything's outlined clearly. Division of assets, spousal support, custody arrangements." He paused, and something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been guilt if Victoria didn't know him better. "If you sign now, we can expedite the process. Have it finalized before the baby comes. Clean break, fresh start for both of us." Victoria stared at the envelope like it was a bomb that might explode if she touched it. She couldn't process what she was hearing. couldn't make her brain work past the roaring in her ears that sounded like the ocean, like drowning, like the moment of impact when the truck had hit her car. They'd been married for 8 years. 8 years of supporting his career, of moving across the country for his fellowship, of putting her own research on hold so he could pursue his ambitions. 8 years of being the perfect doctor's wife, of hosting dinner parties for his colleagues, of sitting through endless hospital galas with a smile plastered on her face. 8 years of slowly disappearing while he became more and more visible. Marcus, I don't understand. Her voice was shaking now, her hands trembling where they rested on her swollen belly. Is this about the accident? About the wheelchair? I'm getting better. Rosa says in another month I'll be walking without assistance. The doctors say I'll make a full recovery, that I'll be able to. It's not about the accident. His voice was flat, final, the way he sounded when he told families their loved one hadn't survived surgery. It's about us, about our marriage. We've grown apart, Victoria. You're focused on your recovery, on the baby. I need someone who can be a partner in my life, not a patient I have to take care of. The cruelty of those words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. I'm your wife, she whispered. I'm carrying your child. Are you? The question hung in the air like poison gas, contaminating everything it touched. Victoria felt the world stop spinning, felt time itself pause. What did you just say? Natalie stepped forward then, her hand sliding onto Marcus's shoulder with possessive ease. She'd been quiet until now, content to watch Victoria's world crumble. But now she spoke, her voice syrup-sweet with false concern. Marcus and I have discussed this extensively, Victoria. The timing of your pregnancy announcement was convenient. Right after the accident, when you knew he'd feel obligated to stay. Her blue eyes glittered with something that might have been malice if it weren't wrapped in such careful politeness. It's understandable that you'd be desperate. But lying about paternity? That's really quite low. You're insane. Victoria's voice shook with rage, with disbelief, with a fury so complete she could taste it like copper on her tongue. This baby is Marcus's. We've been married for 8 years. We've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years. How dare you? How dare both of you? The accident was 6 months ago. Marcus's voice was cold now, surgeon cold. The voice he used when delivering terminal diagnoses to patients who asked too many questions. You claimed you were 7 weeks pregnant then. That would make you almost 33 weeks now. But your abdomen wasn't showing any signs at 7 weeks. No morning sickness, no weight gain, nothing. Because I'd just been in a catastrophic accident. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheelchair armrests. My body was in survival mode. The doctors explained all of this. You were there for those conversations. You heard them say that trauma can suppress pregnancy symptoms, that my body was prioritizing healing over everything else. I was there, Marcus agreed, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. And I've had time to think about it since then. About your sudden pregnancy announcement. About how convenient the timing was. About how you've always been so focused on keeping me tied down. On making sure I didn't succeed without you holding me back. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, hot and humiliating. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. This was Marcus, her husband. The man she'd loved since she was 24 years old. The man who'd promised to love her in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. The man who was now sitting in front of her, looking at her like she was a stranger, like she was nothing. Marcus, please. Her voice broke on his name. I don't know what she's told you, what she's made you believe, but this baby is yours. You know that. You have to know that. We can do a paternity test right now, today, and you'll see what I know, Marcus said, standing up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a scream, is that I'm done. I'm done with this marriage. Done with your constant needs. Done with feeling guilty for wanting a life that doesn't revolve around taking care of someone who can't take care of herself. He looked down at her, and Victoria saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Contempt. Sign the papers, Victoria. Make this easy for both of us. You'll get what's fair in the divorce settlement. I'm not trying to leave you with nothing. But I'm not going to be trapped in a marriage to someone who's using a baby to manipulate me. He turned toward the door, his white coat swirling around him like a cape, like he was some kind of hero instead of the villain destroying her life. Natalie followed, her heels clicking against the floor with a rhythm that sounded like victory. But she paused at the threshold, turned back with a smile that was pure venom wrapped in beauty. Oh, and Victoria? Her voice was still sweet, still pleasant, but her eyes were ice. You should know that Marcus and I have been together for over a year. Since before your accident. Long before. She tilted her head, studying Victoria's face like she was examining something in a petri dish. He was going to leave you anyway. The accident just complicated things. Made him feel obligated to wait until you were more stable. She paused, letting those words sink in like knives. But he's done waiting now. We both are. So sign the papers, move on, and at least you'll have your dignity. She laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. Well, what's left of it anyway? The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. Victoria sat alone in the physical therapy room, 7 months pregnant, still recovering from injuries that had nearly killed her, staring at divorce papers that called her a liar and her unborn daughter illegitimate. The manila envelope sat in her lap like an accusation. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She picked it up with trembling hands, opened the message. It was a photo. Marcus and Natalie in bed together, tangled in sheets Victoria recognized. Her sheets, from her bedroom. The room she'd been too disabled to navigate for the past 6 months, stuck in the downstairs guest room that Marcus had converted into her recovery space. They'd been using her bed, her room, while she slept downstairs, unable to climb the stairs. The timestamp on the photo was from 2 weeks ago. Below the photo, a message. Thanks for letting us have the master bedroom. So much more comfortable than Marcus's old apartment. Hope you enjoyed your last day as Mrs. Morrison. P.S. The house smells so much better without your hospital smell. N. Victoria's hands shook so hard the phone clattered to the floor. She looked down at her swollen belly, at the place where her daughter was growing despite everything. Felt another kick, stronger this time, insistent. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry you're going to be born into this. Another kick, harder, as if her daughter was saying, don't apologize, fight. Victoria wiped her tears, took a deep breath, picked up her phone from the floor. She had 3 missed calls, all from the same number she didn't recognize. There was a voicemail. With shaking hands, she pressed play. Dr. Morrison, this is Robert Chen from Chen & Associates Legal Trust. I was your grandmother's attorney. I have urgent information regarding your inheritance. I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Please call me as soon as possible. A pause. It's about the hospital, Dr. Morrison. It's about St. Catherine's. Victoria's breath caught. The hospital. Her grandmother had worked at St. Catherine's decades ago, back when it was a small community hospital barely staying afloat. Victoria had known her grandmother had some connection to the place, but the details had always been vague. She'd never thought to ask more, had never imagined there was more to know. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the hospital billing department. She'd been getting them for weeks, had been ignoring them because Marcus said his insurance covered everything. Your insurance coverage has been terminated effective immediately. Outstanding balance, $387,890.63. Payment required within 30 days or account will be sent to collections. Victoria stared at the number. $347,000. 6 months of surgeries, of ICU stays, of rehabilitation, of medications that kept her alive and kept her daughter safe. Marcus had canceled her insurance while she was 7 months pregnant, while she was still recovering from injuries that required ongoing medical care, while she was completely dependent on him for everything. Her hand stopped shaking. Something cold and clear settled over Victoria like ice crystallizing. The panic receded, replaced by something else. Something her grandmother would have recognized. Chen women don't break. We wait, we watch, and we win. Victoria grabbed her phone, pulled up the voicemail again, listened to it one more time. Then she called Robert Chen back. He answered on the first ring. Dr. Morrison, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you. I'm sorry, Victoria said, her voice steadier now. It's been a difficult week, understand. His voice was kind, paternal. Your grandmother spoke about you often. She was very proud of you, you know. Very proud of your work in cardiac research. Victoria felt fresh tears threatening. Thank you. I miss her. I know you do. And I'm sorry to have to contact you during what I know must be a challenging time. But your grandmother left very specific instructions about when I was to reveal certain information to you. What kind of information? Information about your inheritance. Robert paused. Dr. Morrison, do you know anything about your grandmother's relationship with St. Catherine's Medical Center? She worked there, Victoria said. A long time ago. She was a trauma surgeon, I think, before she retired. She was. One of the best in the state. Another pause. But that's not all she was, Dr. Morrison. Your grandmother founded St. Catherine's Medical Center 42 years ago, and she owned it until the day she died. The room tilted. I'm sorry, what? Your grandmother was the sole owner of St. Catherine's Medical Center and 12 other medical facilities across 3 states, the Chen Medical Trust. She built it from a small community hospital into an $800 million medical empire. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was hearing. That's not possible. My grandmother was a surgeon. She lived in a small apartment. She drove a 15-year-old Honda. She clipped coupons. She lived simply, Robert agreed. By choice. She believed that wealth should be used to help others, not to show off. She donated millions to medical research every year, anonymously. The Chen Foundation funds scholarships, builds clinics in underserved areas, supports women in medicine. He paused again. And as of 3 months ago, when your grandmother passed away, all of it became yours. You are the sole beneficiary of the Chen Medical Trust. You own St. Catherine's Medical Center, Dr. Morrison. You own the hospital where your husband works. Victoria's hand went to her mouth. She thought about Marcus, about his white coat and his arrogance and his cruelty. She thought about him telling her she was nothing. that she had nothing, that she should sign his papers and walk away with whatever dignity she had left. She thought about Natalie in her grandmother's silk robe, in Victoria's bed, in her house, on her phone sending mocking messages, and she started to laugh. Not hysterical laughter, not the laughter of someone breaking. The laughter of someone who just realized the people trying to bury her had made a catastrophic mistake. "Mr. Chen," Victoria said, her voice clear and strong. "I need to see those documents, all of them. And I need to know exactly what authority I have over St. Catherine's." "Considerable authority," Robert said. She could hear the smile in his voice. "Your grandmother made sure of that. She had very specific ideas about what the Chen Medical Trust should look like after she was gone. Can you come to the hospital today?" "I'm already in my car." Victoria ended the call, looked down at the manila envelope in her lap. The divorce papers Marcus had thrown at her like she was nothing. Then she looked at her reflection in the mirror across the room. Saw a woman who'd been broken and was healing. Who'd been betrayed but wasn't beaten. Who'd been underestimated by the wrong people. "Thank you, Nai," she whispered to her grandmother's memory. "You always knew. You always protected me." Her daughter kicked against her palm, hard, insistent. "Your great-grandmother left us an empire, baby girl," Victoria said softly. "And your father just made the worst mistake of his life." She picked up the divorce papers, flipped through them quickly. Saw Marcus's demands. No spousal support, no marital assets, nothing from the house they'd bought together, except his name was the only one on the deed, she saw now. Nothing from his retirement accounts, nothing from his private practice income. He'd tried to leave her with nothing. He had no idea that she controlled everything. 3 miles away, in his office at St. Catherine's Medical Center, Dr. Marcus Morrison was opening a bottle of expensive scotch he kept in his desk drawer, celebrating. He'd finally done it, finally cut loose the dead weight that had been holding him back for years. Natalie sat across from him, her legs crossed, her smile radiant. "To new beginnings," Marcus said, raising his glass. "To us," Natalie corrected, clinking her glass against his. Neither of them knew that in approximately 6 hours, when Robert Chen finished explaining the full scope of the Chen Medical Trust to Victoria, their entire world would begin to collapse. Neither of them knew that the broken woman they'd just humiliated owned everything they'd built their lives on. Neither of them knew that Victoria Chen-Morrison wasn't just a disabled doctor in a wheelchair. She was the most powerful person in the entire hospital. And she was done being merciful. Marriage backstory. The erosion. 10 years ago, Victoria Chen had been a rising star at Johns Hopkins Hospital. 24 years old, already published in 3 major cardiac journals, presenting research at international conferences. Her groundbreaking work on myocardial tissue regeneration had caught the attention of the NIH. She was on track for early tenure, for her own lab, for the kind of career most researchers only dreamed about. Her grandmother Margaret had been so proud. "You're going to change the world, Sun Nu," Margaret would say in Mandarin, code switching the way she'd done Victoria's whole life. "Chen women don't just survive. We heal others." Margaret Chen's life had been one of relentless determination. Born in Shanghai in 1948, she'd survived political upheaval, famine, and the Cultural Revolution, before finally escaping to Hong Kong in 1969. From there, she'd made her way to San Francisco with $200 in her pocket and a medical degree that American institutions initially refused to recognize. She'd worked as a hospital janitor for 2 years, studying English at night, taking the USMLE exams over and over until she passed. Finally, at 32 years old, She'd completed an American residency in trauma surgery. The only Chinese woman in her program, the only immigrant, the only one who'd had to fight for every single opportunity. By 40, she'd saved enough to buy a failing community hospital in the middle of a medical desert, a poor neighborhood where no one else wanted to practice. St. Catherine's had been bankrupt, decrepit, on the verge of closing. Margaret had bought it for almost nothing and built it into something extraordinary. But she'd done it quietly. Lived in a small apartment, drove old cars, let people assume she was just another surgeon, not the owner of a growing medical empire. Wealth that shows off is wealth that disappears, she'd tell Victoria. Real power is what people don't see. Victoria had grown up watching her grandmother work 80-hour weeks, watching her pour every dollar back into the hospital, into patient care, into building something that would outlast her. She'd learned what it meant to be strong, what it meant to persevere, what it meant to put others first. And then she'd met Marcus Morrison. It was at a cardiac research conference in Baltimore. October 2014. Victoria was presenting her paper on stem cell therapy for damaged heart tissue. She was 24, nervous but prepared, standing at a podium in front of 300 cardiologists and cardiac surgeons. Marcus was a third-year surgical resident, handsome and confident, sitting in the front row with a smile that could melt glaciers. During the Q&A session, he'd asked a question that made Victoria stumble. Not because it was particularly insightful, it wasn't, but because of the way he looked at her, like she was the most interesting person in the room. Afterward, at the reception, he had found her by the bar. "You destroyed my question up there," he had said, handing her a glass of champagne with that devastating smile. "I'm Marcus Morrison, and you're the youngest presenter at this conference by about 15 years. Victoria Chen. And your question had a fundamental flaw in the methodology you were assuming. Brutal and beautiful." His eyes had crinkled at the corners. "Want to have dinner and tell me all the other ways my thinking is flawed?" She should have said no. Should have recognized the charm offensive for what it was. Should have seen the narcissism hidden behind the smile. The way he'd positioned himself in the front row, not to learn but to be seen. The way his question was designed to make him sound smart, not to actually understand her research. But she'd been 24, brilliant but naive. So tired of being taken seriously by everyone except men her own age who seemed threatened by her intelligence. Marcus had made her feel seen, made her laugh, made her forget, for a few hours, that she was the girl who'd spent her childhood helping her immigrant grandmother navigate American medicine, translating at doctor's appointments, explaining insurance forms. He'd made her feel normal, desirable, like she could be a scientist and a woman someone wanted. They dated long distance for 6 months. Marcus was finishing his residency at Cleveland Clinic. Victoria was wrapping up her postdoc at Hopkins. He'd fly to Baltimore on his days off. She'd take the train to Cleveland. They'd spend weekends in bed, talking about the future, about the careers they'd build, about the life they'd create together. "We'll be a power couple," Marcus had said one night, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunrise over Lake Erie. "2 doctors at the top of our fields. We'll publish together, present together, change medicine together." It had sounded romantic, aspirational, like a partnership of equals. Her grandmother had met him exactly once before the wedding, had sat across from him at a dim sum restaurant in Chinatown, watching him struggle with chopsticks, watching the way he ordered for Victoria without asking what she wanted, watching the way he dominated the conversation. Afterward, in Mandarin, so he wouldn't understand, Margaret had gripped Victoria's hand. "Xiao Xin, Sun Nu. Be careful, granddaughter. Some men love what you can do for them more than who you are. The video footage from St. Catherine's Chapel went viral within hours. Multiple guests had recorded the confrontation on their phones. By 6:00 p.m., it was trending on Twitter. By 8:00 p.m., it had been picked up by every major news outlet in Boston. Headlines: Disabled pregnant doctor confronts cheating husband at his wedding, reveals she owns the hospital. Karmic justice: wife destroys ex-husband's career in epic wedding reveal. Boston surgeon suspended after malpractice allegations surface at wedding to his secretary. The wedding revenge heard round the world. Pregnant doctor's epic takedown. The video had everything: a betrayed wife, a cheating husband, a fake pregnancy, medical malpractice, a secret fortune, racism, conspiracy. It was the perfect viral story. By midnight, it had 10 million views. By morning, 50 million. The comments section was ruthless. She walked into his wedding looking like that? He fumbled the bag so hard. Imagine being stupid enough to cheat on a woman who literally owns the hospital where you work. The fake pregnancy plot twist? This is better than any TV show. Sign the papers or lose everything. Famous last words from a man who lost everything. He really thought a disabled pregnant woman had no power. The audacity, the stupidity. Amanda Rivers had orchestrated follow-up interviews. Victoria appeared on Good Morning America 3 days after the wedding, looking professional and composed. Her 8-month belly prominently visible. Interview excerpt. Robin Roberts. Dr. Chen, you've become an overnight sensation after confronting your ex-husband at his wedding. What made you decide to do it in such a public way? Victoria. I didn't want a public confrontation initially. But when I received the wedding invitation to be held at the hospital my grandmother founded and I now own, I realized this was bigger than just my marriage. This was about accountability. Marcus had hurt patients. He'd abused his power, and he needed to face consequences. Robin. The revelation that you own the hospital where he works. That must have been shocking for everyone present. Victoria. My grandmother built that hospital from nothing. She was an immigrant, a trauma surgeon, a brilliant businesswoman who lived simply so she could invest in patient care. She left it to me because she knew I'd protect it and the people who depend on it. Robin. And the baby? Your ex-husband denied she was his. Victoria, placing hand on belly. My daughter is definitely his. Though he doesn't deserve her. The DNA test was conclusive. But he was so convinced by his mistress's fake pregnancy that he couldn't see the truth right in front of him. Robin, what happens now? Victoria, now? I focus on my daughter, my research, and my hospital. I'm rebuilding the life he tried to destroy. And I'm making sure St. Catherine's has proper oversight so no surgeon can hurt patients the way Marcus did. The interview was watched by 12 million people. Victoria Chen became a symbol of survival, of hidden strength, of women who'd been underestimated and came back to prove everyone wrong. Meanwhile, Marcus's life continued its downward spiral. Marcus had tried to negotiate. His lawyers had argued the terms were too punitive. Victoria's response, delivered through Catherine. He drained my bank account while I was pregnant and disabled. He left me homeless. He denied our daughter. He stole from me. The terms are generous, considering I could have pursued criminal charges. Marcus had signed. What choice did he have? It's done, Robert said. The divorce is final as of this morning. You're no longer Victoria Morrison. I never was, Victoria said quietly. I was always Victoria Chen. I just forgot for a while. Maggie made an enthusiastic noise, threw her elephant, and clapped her hands. Someone's happy about that, Robert said with a smile. Victoria picked up her daughter, held her close. We're both happy. There was another knock. Dr. Martinez entered, looking excited. Victoria, I have news. The NIH approved your research grant, $5 million over 3 years for cardiac tissue regeneration. Victoria's breath caught. They approved it? Full funding. They said your proposal was one of the most innovative they'd reviewed this year. You're getting your lab back. Victoria had submitted the grant proposal 4 months earlier. The research she'd abandoned when she married Marcus, when she'd put his career ahead of her own. She was finally getting to pursue the work that had once made her a rising star. When do I start? September. You'll have a team of 3 postdocs and access to the hospital's research facilities. Rachel smiled. Welcome back to science, Dr. Chen. After everyone left, Victoria sat at her desk with Maggie in her lap, looking at the grant approval letter. 8 months ago, she'd been sitting on a basement floor, broken and alone, believing she had nothing. Now she had everything. A daughter, a career, an empire. Her life back. The phone on her desk rang, her direct line, which almost no one had. Dr. Chen, she answered. Victoria. She recognized the voice immediately. Marcus, you're not supposed to contact me, she said, her voice cold. The restraining order. I know. I needed to say something. Victoria should have hung up. Should have reported the violation. Instead, something made her listen. Say it quickly. I saw Maggie's photo, the one you posted on the hospital's social media, the 6-month update. Victoria had posted one photo, Maggie in a tiny lab coat sitting in Victoria's office. The caption, the youngest member of the Chen Medical Trust team. You shouldn't be looking at my social media. I know, His voice cracked. She's beautiful. She looks like you. She does. I made a mistake, Victoria. The biggest mistake of my life. I threw away everything that mattered because I was an arrogant fool who thought I deserved better than what I had. Victoria said nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus continued. I'm not asking to be part of her life. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I know. I know what I lost. And I live with that knowledge every single day. Good, Victoria said simply. You should. Are you happy? The question surprised her. Was she happy? She thought about it. Really thought about it. I'm building something, she said finally. For Maggie, for the hospital, for myself. I'm doing work that matters. I have people who love me. I have a daughter who's perfect. So yes, I'm happy. I'm glad, Marcus said, and he sounded like he meant it. You deserved better than what I gave you. I know. A long pause. Take care of our daughter, Marcus said. Tell her someday that her father was a fool, but he always knew she was precious. I'll tell her the truth, Victoria said. That you made choices that hurt a lot of people, including her, and that those choices had consequences. Fair enough. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Victoria. She hung up, blocked the number, and filed a report about the restraining order violation. Then she picked up Maggie and walked to the window. Your father called, she told her daughter. He wanted to apologize. Too little, too late. Maggie grabbed Victoria's nose, giggled. You're going to be okay without him, Victoria continued. Because you have me. You have your great-grandmother's legacy. You have an entire family of strong women who survived impossible things. She looked at her reflection in the window, saw herself and her daughter, the city spread before them. the hospital her grandmother had built standing strong below. "Chen women don't break," she whispered. "We bend, we heal, and we rise." Maggie made a happy noise, as if in agreement. Victoria smiled. They were going to be just fine. Epilogue. 2 years later, Dr. Victoria Chen stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Boston Convention Center. Behind her, a screen displayed her research. Breakthrough findings in cardiac tissue regeneration that had the potential to revolutionize treatment for heart disease. She was presenting at the American Heart Association's annual conference. 5,000 cardiologists, cardiac surgeons, and researchers from around the world had come to hear about her work. The work she'd started a decade ago, abandoned for Marcus, and finally returned to. And in conclusion, Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "Our findings suggest that with targeted stem cell therapy and growth factor manipulation, we can regenerate damaged cardiac tissue at rates previously thought impossible. This could mean that heart attack survivors could fully recover cardiac function within weeks rather than living with permanent damage." The ballroom erupted in applause. Victoria smiled, accepted questions from the audience, held her own against senior researchers who challenged her methodology. This was what she was meant to do. This was who she was. Not Dr. Morrison's wife. Not the woman defined by her marriage. Dr. Victoria Chen, researcher, scientist, single mother, hospital owner, woman who'd been knocked down and fought her way back. After the presentation, she was surrounded by colleagues congratulating her, asking about collaborations, wanting to discuss her research. Dr. Patricia Kim found her in the crowd. "Victoria, that was incredible. Your mother would be so proud." "Grandmother," Victoria corrected with a smile. "And thank you. I just wish she could have seen this." "She saw it," Patricia said. "She knew you'd get here eventually. That's why she built you the foundation to stand on." Back at her hotel room that evening, Victoria video called home. Rosa answered. She'd moved in as Maggie's nanny and Victoria's right hand, helping manage the impossible logistics of single motherhood and running a hospital empire. "How's my girl?" Victoria asked. The screen shifted. Maggie appeared, now 2.5 years old, wearing pajamas with elephants on them. "Mama! I made it a tower." "You made a tower? Show me." Maggie held up a precarious stack of blocks, beaming with pride. "That's beautiful, baby girl. Mama will be home tomorrow, and we can build an even bigger tower together." "With the elephants?" "With all the elephants." After Maggie went to bed, Rosa gave Victoria the updates. St. Catherine's board meeting is scheduled for Monday. The expansion plans for the new pediatric wing are ready for your review, and there's a letter that came for you today, marked personal. From Eleanor Morrison. Victoria's stomach tightened. She hadn't heard from her ex-mother-in-law in over a year. "I'll look at it when I get home," she said. But curiosity got the better of her. "Actually, can you open it? Read it to me." Rosa opened the envelope on camera, unfolded the letter. "It's handwritten," Rosa said. She began reading. "Dear Victoria, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect your forgiveness. But I needed to write it anyway. I was wrong about you, completely, catastrophically wrong. I saw a young Chinese woman who came from nothing, who married my son, and I decided you were a gold digger. I decided you weren't good enough for our family. I decided to destroy you. I paid Natalie to seduce Marcus. I pressured him to leave you. I helped orchestrate your humiliation. I did everything I could to erase you from our lives. And in doing so, I destroyed my own son. Marcus is working as a medical consultant now, making $70,000 a year. He lives in a small apartment. He has no friends, no reputation, no future. He'll never practice medicine again. But worse than that, he lost his daughter. He lost Maggie. And that's on me. I've spent the last 2 years watching you from afar, watching you rebuild, watching you transform St. Catherine's into something remarkable, watching you raise Maggie with the kind of love and strength my own son never deserved. You're an extraordinary woman, Victoria. You were always extraordinary. I just couldn't see it through my own prejudice. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask only that someday, when Maggie is old enough to ask questions about her father's family, you'll tell her that her grandmother deeply regretted what she did, that she spent the rest of her life trying to be better. I'm donating $1 million to the Margaret Chen Patient Safety Foundation in your grandmother's honor. It's not enough. Nothing could ever be enough. But it's what I can do. Sincerely, Chen-Morrison. Rosa finished reading, looked at Victoria through the screen. What do you think? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I think, she said finally, that she's learning what accountability feels like, what consequences feel like. I think my grandmother would say that growth at any age is valuable. Are you going to respond? No, Victoria said, but I'll accept the donation. The foundation can do good with that money. She paused. And someday, when Maggie asks, I'll tell her the truth, that her paternal grandmother made terrible choices but tried to make amends. That's more than her father ever did. The next morning, Victoria flew home to Boston. Maggie met her at the door of their penthouse, running on toddler legs into her mother's arms. Mama, Mama, Mama. Victoria scooped up her daughter, held her tight, breathed in that perfect baby smell that was already fading as Maggie grew older. I missed you so much, baby girl. I made you a picture. Maggie showed her a crayon drawing, a stick figure labeled Mama next to a smaller stick figure labeled Me and a building labeled Hop Still. Is that St. Catherine's? Victoria asked. Yep, we go there. We do go there. And someday, when you're bigger, you'll decide if you want to work there too, or be a scientist like Mama, or anything else you want. I want to be an elephant. Victoria laughed. You can be an elephant if you want, sweetie. That evening, after Maggie was asleep, Victoria sat in her home office and looked at the letter from Eleanor one more time. Then she put it in a file labeled Maggie, Family History. Someday, her daughter would ask questions, would want to know why she didn't have a father in her life, why she'd never met her paternal grandmother until much later, why her mother's story was so complicated. And Victoria would tell her the truth, would tell her about the car accident and the betrayal and the wedding confrontation and the empire her great-grandmother had built. Would tell her that sometimes people you love hurt you, that sometimes you have to walk away to survive, that sometimes justice looks like consequences, not forgiveness. But she'd also tell her about resilience, about rising after falling, about Chen women and what they're capable of when they stop apologizing for their strength. She'd tell her daughter that you don't need to be rescued because you can rescue yourself. That power isn't given, it's taken, it's built, it's inherited from the women who fought before you. That dignity doesn't break, that love doesn't manipulate, that real partnership lifts you up instead of tearing you down. Victoria closed the file, turned off her computer, walked into Maggie's room. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, surrounded by stuffed elephants, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Victoria touched her cheek gently. Your great-grandmother gave us everything, she whispered. An empire, a foundation, a future. But more than that, She gave us proof that we're strong enough to survive anything. She kissed Maggie's forehead. And that, baby girl, is the real inheritance. Not the money, the strength. Victoria walked to the window of the nursery, looked out at Boston Harbor glittering under the moonlight, looked at the city where her grandmother had landed with nothing and built everything. Somewhere out there, Marcus Morrison was living a small life, full of regrets. Eleanor Morrison was learning that racism and classism had consequences. Natalie Harper was unemployed, unmarriageable, and universally recognized as a cautionary tale. And Victoria Chen was standing in a $3 million penthouse, surrounded by the life she'd built from the ashes of the one Marcus had tried to destroy. She thought about that day in the physical therapy room, the day Marcus had served her divorce papers while she was 7 months pregnant and could barely walk. The day he'd told her she had nothing. He'd been so wrong, it was almost funny. She'd had everything. She just hadn't known it yet. Chen women don't break. They wait, they watch, they heal. And when they rise, the whole world pays attention. Victoria smiled at her reflection in the window. Strong, whole, unbroken. Then she went to bed, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow she'd wake up and continue building her empire, raising her daughter, changing medicine, and living the life she'd always deserved. Marcus had thrown her away thinking she was garbage. Instead, he'd freed her to become everything she was always meant to be. And that, Victoria thought as she drifted off to sleep, was the sweetest revenge of all.